Today, I'm Karen Carter. I'm the Community Relations Manager for the town of Castle Rock and Castle Rock Police. We're so thankful that you took the time to come. I'd like to introduce to you Jennifer Walker. She's the Executive Director of the Crisis Center. After our presentation, we will have time for questions. Again, thanks for coming.
Good morning. As Karen said, I'm Jennifer Walker, and I'm the Executive Director of the Crisis Center. I think I'm supposed to spell my name, so it's JENNIFERWALKER. I've been the Executive Director with the Crisis Center for 17 years, and the Crisis Center serves families who are impacted by intimate partner violence within the 18th Judicial District. Our 30-year history provides resources such as therapy, advocacy, education, and crisis intervention to victims of family violence in the 18th Judicial District. Our goal is to provide support and enhance safety for the families that we serve. Over the years, the Crisis Center has had a great opportunity to partner with law enforcement and law enforcement victim advocates to increase safety and the well-being of victims of domestic violence in our community. Over the past 18 months, we've had a great opportunity to enhance that partnership with local law enforcement through the Lethality Assessment program. This program came to us through the leadership and dedication of Chief Jack Colley with Castle Rock Police Department. And at this time, I'd like to turn this over to Jack, and he can speak more about the lethality assessment. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you for your valued partnership with us. I'd like to introduce my other partners here with me today before I begin my remarks. And these partners are very valued because what we're going to speak about today would not be a reality without their partnership with us. So first, I'd like to introduce Sheriff Tony Spurlock with the Douglas County Sheriff's Office, Chief Dave King with the Parker Police Department, Acting Chief Ron Penson with Lone Tree Police Department, and George Brockler, our District Attorney for the 18th Judicial District. We are proud to meet with you today to talk about a partnership and a domestic violence program that is new to Douglas County and new to Colorado. As leaders in law enforcement, we strive to provide our officers with the knowledge and tools they need to keep our communities safe. All of us standing here have decades of law enforcement experience. Some of us more than others, but we do have decades of law enforcement experience. Today, our role is to lead, guide, and mentor our officers and provide them the tools that they need to do their jobs. Today, we have a shared vision to move our agencies forward, teach law enforcement how to better protect and better serve victims on every call, every day. We feel programs and training such as the lethality program meets those goals. This program offers officer training solution that is solution-driven, is innovative, and a multi-pronged strategy to prevent domestic-related homicides. This program has now been implemented throughout Douglas County and every law enforcement agency. Domestic violence impacts every community across our country, and our communities locally are no exception. In 2015, Douglas County law enforcement responded to nearly 800 domestic violence-related calls for service. If that seems startling, please keep in mind that it's believed that domestic violence is underreported by about 70%. Research shows that in the prior year that a domestic homicide occurs, 44% of abusers were arrested, and almost 1/3 of victims contacted police. Alternatively, and this is very important, only 4% of abused victims had used a hotline or a shelter in the year prior to being killed. The lethality assessment program will significantly increase the number of victims who connect with a hotline and connect with a shelter. That will then help prevent domestic-related homicides. This additional layer of tools and training to law enforcement to provide help to victims of domestic-related homicide and to aid domestic-related homicides throughout our county. So what is lethality assessment? After 25 years of research, the lethality screen identifies characteristics shared by victims who were either killed or nearly killed by their intimate partners. This is a two-pronged intervention process that features research-based lethality screening tool and referral to the crisis center if the victim is screened as high danger. Since in about 1/3 of domestic violence-related homicides, that particular act of violence was the first act of violence, previous abuse is not the only indicator to domestic-related homicide. The lethality screen that we are implementing looks at many dynamics of the relationship. Lethality assessments will be given by our officers to victims of intimate partner domestic violence while on scene. It is a screening instrument consisting of 11 questions that allows officers to assess whether or not the victim of domestic violence is in high danger of being killed by their partner. Right here to my left, you can see a picture of the screening instrument that we are using. After the screen is completed, officers can determine the likelihood of lethality and the likelihood this person will be killed by their partner. What we are learning is it becomes very impactful for a police officer to sit with a victim of domestic violence and tell them that you are in a high danger of being killed by your domestic partner. That's very impactful, and it's a very powerful statement to hear from law enforcement. Once a high danger victim has been identified by law enforcement connects them directly with the crisis center so that emergency safety planning and other services can be provided to that victim. After the crisis center advocates provide the immediate help to the victim, law enforcement-based advocates will then step in and provide the longer-term layer of assistance to those domestic violence victims, as they have always done. Since August 1st of this year, 128 lethality assessments have been completed. Of those, about 70 of those assessments have been scored or screened as high danger, that the victim of domestic violence is in danger of being killed by their partner. That's about 55%. Today, we are proud to tell you that nearly 400 law enforcement officers throughout Douglas County, including the Douglas County Sheriff's Office, Castle Rock Police, Parker Police, and Lone Tree Police, have been trained in lethality assessment training, are very adept at providing this instrument to domestic violence victims. We also train victims advocates, judges, employees at the district attorney's office, and crisis center advocates, as well as Department of Service social workers. This training consisted of 2 tiers. The first tier for law enforcement consisted of an overview of the program and an in-depth understanding of the screening. And as well, and this is very important, teaches officers how to empathetically deliver the message that they are in danger, high danger of being killed by their partner if so screened. There's also role-playing exercises for the officers as well. Tier number 2 is non-law enforcement training, and that consisted of an overview of the program and the correlation between the responses and the high level of danger. Across Douglas County, our officers now have more insight, more knowledge, not only how to manage domestic violence calls, but what to look for while they are trying to protect the victims while on scene. Lethality assessment is not just about reducing domestic violence. There are other benefits. Police officers now are looking at incidents of domestic violence in a more multi-dimensional way. It's not just one-dimensional. Officers are learning how to better connect with victims and to demonstrate empathy. Thus, we are improving our services to victims of crime and domestic violence. Intimate partner violence knows no boundaries. It is blind to race and ethnicity and all income levels. Lethality assessment gives law enforcement officers the knowledge they need to assess each incident and connects them to the services that are protective with the goal of preventing domestic-related homicides. Those are my opening remarks, and what I'd like to do now is turn it over to District Attorney George Brockler.
Thank you. Thanks, Chief. My name is George Brockler. Last name is B-R-A-U-C-H-L-E-R. I am the Douglas County District Attorney, as well as the DA for Arapahoe, Elbert, and Lincoln counties. The lethality assessment tool that is publicized here today exists to save lives and to prevent pain and suffering. It's not every day that law enforcement gets together with this great partnership and rolls out a tool who doesn't exist to help prosecution. It doesn't exist to increase penalties against anyone. It exists, in essence, to cut down on the number of cases that my office prosecutes. And frankly, if Jack's tool here is right, we'll have less work, and that's a good thing. This is a tool that seeks to get information and give information to put victims in a better position to protect themselves and to avail themselves of the services that exist. That matters. The fact that this particular tool is unique to Colorado and is for the first time rolled out here in Douglas County is both a point of pride, but I think also something that I hope the rest of the state looks at as a sign of leadership in Douglas County. To the extent that this model here can end up becoming a pilot project of sorts for the rest of the state and we can get good results, I hope that we see this rolled out throughout the rest of my jurisdiction and throughout the rest of the state of Colorado. Domestic violence is some of the most complicated, confounding crime that law enforcement encounters, not just the men and women on the street, but even in the courtrooms. The dynamics that are involved touch people in their hearts, they're emotional, they make people make decisions that seem contrary to common sense sometimes, contrary to the advice that a mom, a dad, a brother, a sister, a neighbor would give. They're tough, they're hard to crack. This tool will help us, I think, provide victims with information sufficient for them to make less emotional decisions, better decisions that help protect them, their children, and maybe even prevent future crime. Now, it's not just about homicide, by the way. We have a whole host of crimes that fall under domestic violence that may ultimately be prevented by this, whether it's attempted murder, first-degree assault, second-degree assault, other attempted assaults, even child abuse may end up being positively impacted by this kind of a tool. One thing that this tool is not, it's not a guarantee. The use of this tool is not going to prevent domestic violence homicides entirely. It is not going to keep good, well-meaning, well-trained law enforcement officers from concluding that someone may not be high risk and then that person turns around and commits a horrible crime against someone. But this is a step in the right direction. And if the metrics that have been developed through the 30 other places across the country that have used this are legitimate, and if they can be applied here, we can get those same results, I think that what we'll see is a downturn in subsequent domestic violence on call-outs where law enforcement has shown up to get information and give information. I'm extremely optimistic. I'm encouraged by the fact that everybody behind me is a partner in this program, and I think means earnestly to see it succeed. I'm proud to be here. I appreciate Chief Cawley asking me to come out and talk about this, and I'm proud to stand up here with the other great law enforcement chiefs in front of me. I think I'm supposed to introduce John Elway. Is that not right? Nope. I think I'm supposed to go back to Chief Cawley.
So the launch of this program obviously was a major collaborative effort between all of our partners that we've introduced today. And without them, the lethality assessment program would not be a reality. And to that, I'm very indebted to them. And I think it just shows how our partnerships, how strong they are in Douglas County. And I'm very proud of that. So thank you all for coming today. We will stick around for a little bit if you have any questions for us. I can answer a couple of questions now if you have any that are on top of your mind. Tony?
Chief, a little over a year ago in Kirsten Lockett, domestic violence murder in your city. What role did that play in what you developed?
We actually were looking at the lethality assessment prior to that incident. So this was something that we were looking at probably 2 years ago, and it took about a year for us to develop and train our officers and to collaborate with the partners behind me. So it did not play a role at all. We are glad to have this tool in place now so that we can help prevent those types of incidents.
And then a follow-up on a bigger issue. So you've got Kirsten Lockett here in Castle Rock. You had Krista Benton in Littleton. You had Kara Russell in Denver. 3 really high-profile domestic violence murders in our community in the last year and change. All 3 of those had law enforcement interaction before the murders. What do you say to those stories, to those women, now that you're trying to make a difference?
Sure. So we believe that lethality assessment will help prevent domestic-related homicide. And like George Brockler said, this tool will not totally prevent another domestic homicide from happening again, but we do know that from the data that we have, it will reduce the likelihood of that. It also will allow us to put the victim of domestic homicide, or the victims of domestic violence, in connection with a hotline, with a crisis center, and get them the services that they need so they can get help once we arrive on a scene. It also allows the officers to have a more personal touch with that victim and to answer and ask questions and with that victim on a more personal level, so that we aren't just simply gathering facts, making an arrest if appropriate, and leaving. I think that those benefits are going to play out to be beneficial for not only law enforcement, but for domestic violence victims.
I'm sorry if I missed this, but how long does it take for an officer to become fully trained in this program?
It takes about 2 hours. Again, the training that I outlined earlier, it's about a 2-hour program to train those officers, and each of the law enforcement agencies in Douglas County have trainers available to train staff ongoing.
What kind of reaction, Chief, are you getting from your officers? You've talked about the programs that are in place. So I've talked to officers during the stories that we've covered, and one of their frustrations is it's such a gray area. I mean, when you get above the probable cause bar, that's simple, but when you're a little bit below it, it's gray. And making that call, they've told me, is really difficult. What are you hearing from the officers now that you've created this more black and white tool?
What we're hearing from the officers is that they really appreciate the training that we're giving them, because domestic violence calls are a regular type of call that we respond to on a weekly basis. So receiving additional training on how to help victims has been very beneficial from a law enforcement standpoint. They also feel that we are able to provide another layer of protection, another layer, something that they can help the domestic violence victim with, as opposed to just simply answering or asking questions and determining whether or not there's probable cause to make an arrest. They're actually now able to speak with domestic violence victims on a personal level, and really, as I mentioned before, is to kind of drive into the multidimensional issues that may be at play in those domestic violence relationships. All right, well, thank you all for coming again, and we will be available for a few minutes after the news conference here. Thank you.
Just bring you in your appreciate it, John. I didn't read this article. It was great. The GQ stuff going on there. Those pictures in your place. I want to see the one that I saw in the paper. Maybe over the square, looking down.